In this unit, we're looking at 4.5. So what we've discussed so far is industrialization of the United States, the Industrial Revolution in the United States. We talked about the importance of the railroad, the transcontinental railroad, creating a national market, and how that spurred the economy because of needing resources to build the railroad and then the trade that occurred after the railroad was built. We talked about the factors of production and how it was favorable to businesses at the time, how there were all these new natural resources found out west, and that led to being able to create more products. We talked about how the government was favorable to businesses, how they set high tariffs to protect American industries. We talked about how government also protected businesses over workers. And we talked about how conditions were better for the business owners while they were worse for the workers and the farmers. In this unit, we're going to talk about urbanization. That means the building up of cities. Well, cities, it's no big mystery why cities grew at the time. Cities grew because people were moving into cities to find jobs. That's where the industries were. Since there was open immigration, which we've talked about before too, where they just let as many immigrants come in as they wanted to help give cheap labor, then these cities really grew and grew and grew with the immigrants coming in, with the farmers leaving the farms and moving to the cities to find industrial work. And so that led to a little bit of a movement from the farm to the city. There are also new immigrants coming in, and that led to the rise of ethnic neighborhoods, like Little Italy in New York and Chinatown and other examples of that. That also led to really importance of what was called political machines. Political machines is something that they really need to understand that concept. And then we'll also talk about African Americans start moving to the north as well as the Midwest and West. So immigration increased in the 19th century, remember, for cheap labor. And as a result, cities grew. And so these immigrants, they wanted to be involved in their new country. They wanted to have a say in the democratic process. So we'll talk about how that happens. So remember, urbanization is the growth of cities, urban cities. Cities really develop because of trade, transportation, and industrial production. Remember, the industries are in the cities. And plus, they have new transportation techniques to move people back and forth to their jobs. There are also a lot of technological innovations that are going to fuel the growth of cities. You have elevators and steel girders, which allow buildings to be built higher. So you can have the start of skyscrapers, now not what you would think of as skyscrapers today, but larger buildings. You have suspension bridges, like the Brooklyn Bridge, trolley cars and elevated trains and subways. Population also grew because farmers left the farms and immigrants moved in, and so that led to a rich cultural life in the cities. And so a lot of people actually moved to the cities for the cultural life. It's important to understand, though, a majority of Americans still lived outside of urban areas prior to 1920s. Most people do not live in the cities yet. They still live on farms in rural America. So the patterns of immigration, old immigrants prior to the Civil War were mostly Irish and German. The new immigrants are from Southern and Eastern Europe, and they have a lot different languages than these previous immigrants. They have a lot different religions, and it's a really much harder time for them to assimilate into the United States culture. Think about Irish and Germans, they're both kind of similar in that they're European, they speak Germanic languages. Irish speak English, so that's not a big difference. And then there are also a lot of Germans already here. So these new immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy and Greece, are going to look different, they're going to talk different, and so it's going to be really tough for them to assimilate. So one thing they do, which is just should sound right, is they moved into ethnic neighborhoods. They moved into neighborhoods with people similar to them, which is kind of what we've always done, right? Move into neighborhoods, people that speak our language, people who look like us, act like us, do similar things like us. So that's what happens. They move into these ethnic neighborhoods like Little Italy. What happens is that when these immigrants come over is they want to get involved in the political process. So political machines develop. They help new immigrants find jobs and places to live, and in return, the new immigrants vote for the person the boss wanted them to vote for. So what would happen is that immigrant got off the boat, they go meet the ward boss or the political machine's boss, and the ward boss would get them a place to live, they'd get them a job, and then in return, that person would then vote for that boss or whoever the boss wanted. Now, most times it's not them threatening them to vote for him. A lot of times it's just out of gratitude that, hey, that person got me a job, that person got me a place to live, so I'm going to vote for that person. The most infamous is Boss Tweed, who basically used a lot of graft to make millions and millions of dollars under the table in New York in the famous Tammany Hall. and he defrauds the government of lots and lots of money, which is going to lead to eventually people wanting to change the system because these people get so much power because the immigrants keep voting for them. We'll talk about that more specifically in class. There are a lot of problems within the city. One is that they're overcrowded. There are more people in these areas than what they can hold, and I'll show you some really good pictures of this. There's also bad sanitation. There's not a very good sewer situation, so it's really kind of gross, and we'll talk about that in class soon. I'll show you some pictures. There's non-existent transportation for a lot of these people. They can't really move back and forth, so they have to like walk, or they have to mainly just walk from place to place. There's a lot of crime because there's so many people on top of each other, and there's not enough police to actually enforce the rules. And then fire is also a problem. There's not enough firemen around to actually put out fires. So those are some problems within the cities, and I'll show you some pictures of those. Right after the Civil War, there's not a large migration of African Americans. Most African Americans stay on the farm because it's what they knew. Although, as we're going through history, some African Americans are going to leave the South because they're tired of discrimination and intimidation and lynchings. They're tired of farm prices declining and them being stuck in a cycle of poverty. And so African Americans are going to leave the South to try to get a better opportunity. So a lot move north. This is the start of the Great Migration. It really doesn't finish until after World War I. So a lot of African Americans move north to try to find jobs. They're still treated unfairly in the north. They're still moving to segregated neighborhoods like Harlem. And they are generally the last ones hired and the first ones fired. The movement of African Americans is really going to intensify during World War I with a lot of white soldiers overseas fighting. That's going to leave an opportunity for African Americans to get jobs in the cities. And so this is the start of African Americans moving out of the South and trying to find a better life. That's all I have for 4.5. So we talked about the city, we talked about problems within the city, we talked about why the city grew because of industrialization. We also talked about political machines, how immigrants got tied into the voting process, and I'll give you some more examples of that in class. So go to Canvas, turn your notes guide, take the video quiz, and make sure you write your name in ink on the notes guide. Thank you very much.